Robert.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, hi everyone. So today I'm going to show you how to make a double barrel cake, and it's going to have a pumpkin design because it's close to Halloween. So to get started, I have my 8 layers of pumpkin spice cakes, but you could use any cakes that you like. And I'm just going to put a little buttercream down on my board to make sure that the bottom layer sticks. I don't want this sliding off. And now I'm just going to place the first layer. And then I'm going to center it as much as I can on the board. You want to make sure you do this because it's going to be really hard to move it later. Okay, so now that it's centered, I like to use an ice cream scoop to measure out frosting. So this is 3 tablespoons an ice cream scoop. That way I can make sure I have the same amount of frosting between each layer. Then I'm going to take an offset spatula, and then I just move that around and make that layer even. And I like to use a small offset spatula. I just find that I have more control with it. So even when I make large cakes, like 10-inch, 12-inch cakes, I still like to use a smaller offset spatula. It's just more control, and I can make sure that the layer is even. Okay, so now that this is on here, I'll make sure one that's smooth. Now I can move on to the second layer. Actually, before I'm actually going to take this off, before I push that down, I want to add sprinkles in between each of these layers. So I have these sprinkles here, these Sweet Tooth Fairy Halloween sprinkles, and I'm just going to add a few in between the layers. And then I can add the next layer and then repeat that process. Right here, you want to make sure that each cake is centered on the cake below it. So I'm just going to get down to make sure that it's level. Okay, and now I can keep going with my next. Okay, again, adding the sprinkles to this. A little color and a surprise in the middle. Then again, going to the next layer. Sometimes it helps to get eye level to the cake. All right, I'm going to add the next frosting. And I know that sometimes I would like to add buttercream with a piping bag, but for me, I just find it easier to use an ice cream scoop. But I see multiple ways of adding the buttercream to the cake, and whichever way is easiest for you, because everyone has their own ways of doing things. I accidentally wiped some buttercream off the cake. Add that back. So now I'm going to add this next layer. And for this layer, I'm not going to add any buttercream on the top. Just going to place it, make sure that it's centered. And because it's a double barrel, we have 4 more layers to go. Because you don't want to get a super tall cake, this is going to be a double barrel. So I'm actually going to dowel the cake. So I have these dowels here. And then I'm going to put in a cake board. And I have a hole in this cake board because I'm going to put a dowel through the middle of this later. So you want to make sure that if you do this, you don't have to do this, but it's a way to keep the cake sturdy. And I'm going to show you why the hole's there. So I'm just going to place that there, see where the dowel should go. And I'm going to place 3 dowels into this cake. Once I place the first one, I have an edible marker. So I'm just going to mark where it follows. Again, this step isn't necessary. You don't have to do this. But I just use an edible marker to mark it, and now I'm just going to cut it. And now I need 3 of these, so I'm going to line it up and then cut it even to the next one. You want to make sure that all 3 are even. And this is a very important step. That went flying across the room. This is a very important step because you do not want the cake to get smushed by the weight above, because eventually, if you don't have any support in such a tall cake, it'll start leaning and it'll start getting smushed. And the buttercream in between the layers will start to come out. So you don't want that happen. So I have 3 of these. They're all the same height. So I'm just going to put these in the cake. I'm basically forming a triangle. Now that these are in the cake, I'm just going to put a little buttercream on the cake. And this way it's going to make sure that the board is going to stick. It does not have to be a thick layer of buttercream. And now I'm going to take the board. I'm going to place that. And now we have a sturdy, and I can push down, the cake won't get smushed, and I'll move on to adding the next 4 layers doing the same steps. And you want to make sure that you have this even. And we can now start adding, and again, I'm just going to add a little buttercream to this board to make sure that the cake sticks and it doesn't slide off. Now that it's even, I'll keep repeating that process of adding buttercream and sprinkles. And one thing I like to do whenever I'm adding frosting between the layers is, because I have to do a crumb coat, I allow some of the frosting to go on the outer edges because I can use this frosting for the crumb coat and I don't have to use any more. But sometimes you may still have to use a little more frosting, but this is a way to speed up that process. And the sprinkles. Layer cake. Again, making sure that I have that even. And the taller the cake, the easier it is to see if the cake's leaning. And because this cake is tall, we definitely want to make sure that it's not leaning. I don't know if anyone has any questions or anything right now, but
I think we're good so far on questions. Some people asked what you are using to have the cake spin.
yeah, so this is just a cake turntable. There's many types. This is just one of my favorites. It has a really good spin to it, so that's why I like to use this one. But a cake turntable is a really great addition to have if you're going to decorate cakes. You can use the turntable to work in your advantage instead of having to work around the cake.
Do you have the brand name of the one you're using?
I can get you all the brand name.
Perfect.
I don't remember offhand the name of this one, but it starts with the letter A.
Okay, Mary, I hope that answers your question. It will be coming soon.
So this is the last layer, just adding the buttercream, the sprinkles, and then we'll move on to the crumb coat. And because I have the support in the middle now, it's easier for me to add this layer of frosting, because if not, it would be falling over and it would be a disaster. So that's why you want to make sure whenever you're making a tall cake and this double barrel cake, you want to make sure that you have that support in the middle. That was one of my early mistakes. I made when I first started making cakes. They didn't turn out that well. Okay, so now that this is done, I'm going to do one more thing before I add the next layer. And that's, I'm going to add a dowel down the middle of the cake. And this is why I have the hole in the middle. And this is going to prevent it from falling over. So I'm just going to find the middle of the cake and push through. And I should be able to find the hole that I put in the board. There it goes. And I'm just going to push down. And then I'm just going to cut off so you can't see that part. And this is going to make sure that the cake doesn't fall over later. So I'm just going
Hey,
to cut
Robert.
it. Yes.
People are wondering what they should do if their cake is leaning a little bit right now.
Okay, so if the cake is leaning, I hope you all put the support because that would have stopped it. Now, if you did have a support right now, it's the perfect time to push it back over just a little bit. Right now, that's just the best that you can do is move it over. But as long as you have that support there, it should be fine and it shouldn't fall over. And if you just did this trick of putting the dowel down, now this cake definitely won't fall over because the stick is going through the board. So now the cake is steady and sturdy. But right now, it's the perfect time before you move on to fix the cake if it's leaning. That way, you don't have a disaster later. So the last step is to add our sprinkles to this layer. I'm adding the last layer of cake. And now I'm going to do a crumb coat. Again, making sure I have that centered. And the thing is, your final coat, even if your cake is leaning just a little, if it's leaning a little but it's sturdy, your final coat can even the cake out and make it look like it's straight. As long as it's sturdy, because if it's leaning and it's not sturdy, it's probably going to fall over. So just you might want to fix that. But if it's sturdy, it'll be okay. Use your final coat to basically even out the outside layer, and that'll fix everything. So now I'm just going to do the final coat. The crumb coat, I'm sorry, I'm doing the crumb coat, and this is just going to trap those crumbs. So if you ever have the issue of cakes just coming apart when you're trying to add the final coat of frosting, and you start seeing crumbs everywhere, this is going to help you. And this does not have to be a thick layer, very, very thin layer. This is just trapping those crumbs.
Do the dowels have to be food safe? And do you know the diameter of the ones that you're using?
So I'm using the celebrated dowels. I'm not sure of the exact dimension. Actually, I can give it to you. These are a 0.25 in diameter. But yes, they should be food safe. Just wooden dowels that you can buy. You can buy these at Michael's. These are work, or you can use straws. If you don't have any dowels, you can use straws. The straws are actually really sturdy whenever holding up a cake, and sometimes I use those as well.
Do you recommend freezing the cakes to prevent crumbling, or is a crumb coat a better idea?
You can freeze the cakes if you like. I personally just like to do a crumb coat because if you freeze the cake, one thing that can happen is the cake can start getting condensation and like water starting to appear on the cake. And that's not a really good thing, especially if you have different dyes. It can make the dye start running. So I prefer to just do a crumb coat, but freezing the cakes, it's something that you can do. Everyone does it differently.
And another question for straws, would you use a boba straw?
Yes, that's what I use. If you don't have boba straws, you can actually still use regular straws. But
Okay.
yes, boba straws are the best choice if you're going to use a straw.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to quickly do this crumb coat again. Just going around the cake. Like I said, this is a very, very thin coat of frosting. It's not a lot at all. And one thing I'm noticing is that the frosting is a little thick, and sometimes it makes it kind of difficult to actually apply it and move it around the cake. So one thing that you can do is just microwave it just for a few. You don't want to do it too much where it melts, but you just want to basically thin it out just a little bit, and it makes it easier to smooth onto the cake.
Great. And then what type of buttercream are you using?
So right now I'm just using Swiss Marine buttercream that I made, but I'm going to be using the Sweet Tooth Fairy, the black buttercream, to actually make the buttercream transfer. But this frosting here is Swiss Marine buttercream. But the trick again of putting the frosting in the microwave for just a few seconds, that works for any type of frosting.
What do you use to cut the dowels?
You can use anything. So what I'm just using like I'm using needle nose pliers, and I only use those for food, so they're going to be safe. But they have a very easy way to cut the dowels. But you can use anything that you have. But scissors are going to be so easy to use if you're using boba tea straws. If you're not using boba tea straws, you may want to get some type of device that can cut through things that are thick, because that is wood, so it's pretty difficult to cut through if you're using scissors. Okay, so now that my crumb coat is basically done, I'm just going to wipe off some of the excess. So I have a large scraper here, and I'm just going to go around the cake one time, and that took all that off. I'm just going to clean this off. So now it's time to do the final coat. Now I know sometimes people, I've seen, I used to, but I found out that it isn't really necessary to chill the cake before you do your final coat. Because now that I have the crumb coat, I don't have to worry about that. So I'm just going to dye this frosting orange, because this is going to be used for my final coat.
Do you know where you got that big scraper from?
I'm pretty sure it came from Michael. So now I'm going to dye my frosting orange. So I'll put a little frosting into a bowl, and I'm just going to microwave it and then put the gel food coloring in it, because I find that it mixes better. So I'm just going to microwave this for just a second. Okay, so now that I have this microwave, I'm now going to use this Satin Ice orange gel food coloring, and I'm adding this into this buttercream that I melted down just a little. And I'm going to dye this first, and I'm over dyeing it. You can see it's a very, very bright orange, but adding it to the white buttercream and dilute that color. But this way, the color will easily go into the white buttercream. Sometimes you can start seeing streaks of color or little specks of color if you don't do this step. So this is a good little tip for you. Now that I have that in, I'm just going to transfer that over to my white buttercream. I'm just going to mix this so it's all combined. And again, at this time, if you're mixing your frosting, if you find that if it's too thick, this would be the perfect time to just throw it in the microwave just for a second. I always like to stir my buttercream on low with a stand mixer to get rid of any bubbles. So, and then if I need to heat it, I like to use a glass bowl. That way, if I need to put this in the microwave, it can just pop right into the microwave and I can take it right back out.
Do you prefer to hand stir than use a standing mixer?
I would prefer to use a stand mixer for sure, but just going to quickly do it with my hand. This is pretty much all mixed in now. I am finding this to be a little thick, but since this is the final coat, it should be okay. And now what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to put this in a piping bag to do the final coat. So I'll just have a cup here, a tall cup. I'm going to open the bag. And I'm just going to add my buttercream to that.
Do you have a place?
What's that?
Sorry, Robert, do you have a place for people to find the recipe for your buttercream?
Well, I haven't shared it yet, but sure. I'm actually planning to share it to my website soon, actually.
Well, that's good to know. People are very curious.
I'll be sure to send it to my website.
And what piping tip are you going to use?
So to add the buttercream to the cake, I'm not using any piping tip. Later on, I will be using a piping tip for the top design, but for now, there's no piping tip. I'm just going to add the buttercream, and I'm just going to cut a hole in the bottom of the bag. So with scissors, I'm just going to cut a hole. And now I'm just going to apply the buttercream to the cake. And one way I'm going to do this, I'm going to make sure that my cake is centered. And I have a few crumbs on the board, so this will be the perfect time to wipe those off to make sure they aren't in my final coat. So I'm going to center the cake on the turntable. And I'm just going to turn the cake and apply the buttercream. This does not need to be a thick layer at all. And I'm just going to go all around. And the reason why I like to do this, this actually prevents from having a lot of air bubbles and a lot of big gaps in the buttercream if you just put it on with a spatula. So just going around the cake. Again, your final coat does not have to be thick. And I actually don't even have to put any on the top because I'm going to be putting a drip on the very top of this cake. So there's not a need for any buttercream to be on the top unless you want there to be. It's not necessarily because of the drip. Okay, so I have this all in there, and if I'm looking around, if I see any spaces where I may have missed, it'd be a great time to just fill that in, but everything seems to look okay. So now I'm just going to take my scraper again, and I'm just going to go around the cake. I'm going to do one slow turn to start off. I'm just going to scrape this off. I'll scrape that off, and I'm just going to go around again until it's all smooth. So you can either do it like I just did, one small turn, or you can just place your scraper there and just turn the table, which is why a turntable is very helpful. I'm going to keep doing this until I see the final coat is completely smooth.
Robert, I just wanted to let you know we are at the 30-minute mark.
Okay, thank you. So as I'm doing this, I just see there's some gaps here on this side, so I'm just going to fill that in with a little more buttercream.
Are you scraping with the beveled edge away from the cake?
Yes, the beveled edge is away from the cake. All right, so I filled in any other spots that I saw. And again, just going to keep turning the cake. And the taller the cake, the harder it is to actually do a good final coat, a good smooth final coat. So it may take a couple of turns to go around, but you can finally get it smooth. So I'm just going to go around this a few more times. And then if your cake was leaning, like now would be a good time to use this final coat to straighten it back up. So even if you have to have a little more buttercream on one side of the cake than the other side, just to make it even, at least you wouldn't be able to tell that it was leaning. So this looks pretty good. I'm just going to do one more top here. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now I'm just going to basically take off this extra on the top. So using my offset spatula, and I'm just using my scraper, I'm going to clean it off. And then I'm just going to start from the outside and pull in. I'm going to do that all around the cake. And if you want to add a full layer of buttercream on the very top, you definitely can. But since there's going to be a drip covering the very top of the cake, it's not always necessary.
Do you prefer an acrylic, metal, or plastic scraper?
So I like to use either acrylic or metal. There's nothing wrong with plastic, but a lot of plastic scrapers have a very, not even all plastic, but some places have a rounded edge. And I like for the edge of the scraper to be sharp so that I can have a good 90-degree angle going against the cake. And the reason why I like to use metal is because sometimes, depending on the cake design, like a striped cake, I like to heat up my metal scraper and then freeze the cake and then use the heated scraper to help smooth out the frosting of the stripes. So of course I wouldn't use an acrylic for that. So it just depends, but usually I like to use acrylic. All right, so now that this is done, I'm just going to clean off the board. So there's many ways you can clean off the board anyway, but I'm just going to use a bench scraper, a paper towel. I'm going to wrap it around it, and just going to go on the edge and just pull away. Okay, now that that's clean, I'm now going to add sprinkles to the bottom of the cake. So I'm just going to pour some in my hand. And then I'm just going to just push it slightly against the cake. And it's okay if some of them are missing. You can wipe them off. If you want to put a pan underneath your cake to help get rid of any of the excess sprinkles that go everywhere, that's definitely a good idea. And again, just going around the cake. Okay, so now that these are all on the cake, I'm now going to take an offset spatula. Wipe this off clean. And I'm just going to push these into the cake to make sure that at any step, any parts that I'm missing, that I'm filling it in. So make sure that they're firmly pressed up against the cake and they don't fall off. Right, it seems pretty good. And you can put these as high as you want on the cake. We are doing a drip and a pumpkin face. So you just want to make sure that you leave room for some of those things. So now that this part is done, just wipe off the excess, but I'm just going to put this in the fridge to chill because now I'm going to start working on my buttercream transfer with the black buttercream frosting. And you can switch the cameras over.
If anybody has questions, this would be a great time to get them answered.
Okay, so now that I have that done, I'm just now going to start working on the face. So I have this pumpkin here that I printed out, and you can pretty much freestyle this if you want, but I just printed out a pumpkin. I have a piece of parchment paper because I'm actually going to type on the parchment paper to transfer to the cake. and it's also, you can just see straight through it. So for this, I'm using this black buttercream, this Sweet Tooth Fairy black buttercream. And it's kind of thick. So actually what I like to do, especially for this type of buttercream, I do like to put this in the microwave just for a few seconds and then mix it. This way that it'll thin out just a little bit and it'll make it easier to pipe our pumpkin face. So I'm just going to microwave this for about 10, 15 seconds. Okay, so this buttercream is now been microwaved just to soften it just a little, so that way it's a little easier to pipe. If you find that you need to do it a little more, just throw it in the microwave just a few more seconds, just to thin it out.
So people are wondering, how did you make the transfer, or if it's pre-made?
The pumpkin face?
Yeah.
This is one I found online. But you could use anything that you want. You can even freestyle.
And do you know how many pounds of buttercream you used on the cake?
I don't know in pounds, but I will say I use, I think 6 quarts is what I typically use. I don't have to use the whole thing, but what I just used for this cake, the white buttercream in between the layers and then dyed it orange for the final coat, that was, not 6 quarts, 4 quarts.
4 quarts.
Actually, I'm still telling you the wrong thing. It's 6 cups, actually.
6 cups.
Yes, that's correct. Okay, so the buttercream was just a little too thick still, so I microwaved it just for a few more seconds. Now it's a lot more. See, it flows a lot more easier than it did when I first had it. So I'm just going to mix it up just a little bit more. And I'm just going to do the same thing I did before with the buttercream for the final coat. I'm just going to take a piping bag. I'm going to add that to the cup, and I'm not going to put a tip on the end of this bag. And I'm going to add the buttercream in this cup. Okay. Now removing that, and I'm just going to cut off just a little bit from the end of this bag, because I don't want this hole to be too big, so that I can make sure that I can draw a really good face. See, my parchment paper is curling just a little. I'll make sure I can get flat. And I'm just going to cut off just a tiny bit off of this bag, because I want the hole to be very small so that I can control what I'm drawing. Okay. Now with that, I'm just going to start with this eye. Again, you can freehand this. And I'm not going to do this perfectly. I'm just going to basically trace around it. Once I have it traced, I'm going to fill it in. And I'm just going to go all around the cake doing that same thing. Okay.
About 20 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. Because I'm doing this kind of quickly, y'all, like I said, it's not going to be perfect, but if you want to, you can really make any kind of design that you want. And in doing a transfer, printing off what you like to do is a really good way to get a really nice image. I'm just going to cut a little bit off of the tip of this just to make the hole just a little bigger. And doing a buttercream transfer is kind of the same thing that you would do if you were basically using an edible image with a printer. This is just an alternative way if you don't have a printer. Okay, so now that I have this all on there, one thing about this buttercream is kind of like American buttercream, so it will develop a crust. So if it starts drying, what you can do, especially if it's not completely even, see my finger's not even, it's not even coming off because it's like American buttercream, it starts to form a crust. You could just push down on it to kind of level it out to make sure that that layer is all even. You see, it doesn't even transfer over. And the reason why you want this flat is once we transfer this over to the cake, you want to make sure that it sticks to the cake. So you want to make sure that it's all level so that the chances of it peeling off it won't happen. Okay, so now that this is done, I have the cake that I have in the fridge chilling. So now I'm going to bring that back. And then I can move over our buttercream transfer. Okay, so here's the cake and it's been chilled. So now I'm just going to take that transfer and I'm going to find exactly where on the cake I would like it to be. You got to see it through the paper. And I'm just going to watch myself, measure it even. I'm just going to push that onto the cake. And I'm going to lightly tap to make sure that it's sticking.
Hi, Robert. We have a few questions. So, would you always use an American buttercream for the transfer?
You can use any buttercream that you like. This works for any type of buttercream.
And would it make a difference or not if the transfer was refrigerated?
So now that I have the transfer on there, now I'm going to put it in the fridge. So you want to make sure that you don't chill it first. Because if you do that, because this cake is curved, if the buttercream is hard, you're going to break the buttercream up because the buttercream gets firm. So you don't want to chill your buttercream after you do the transfer. So now that I have this on here, now I'm going to put it in the fridge. And this way it's going to chill this buttercream. And that way I can pull the parchment paper off. And the parchment paper, the buttercream, the black buttercream won't come off with the parchment paper. And the last thing to do now is to do our drip. Okay, so while the cake is chilling, we're just gonna let it chill for like 2 minutes and then I'll pull it off. This is just gonna make sure that the face doesn't come off with the parchment paper. I'm going to add this drip. This is the Sweet Tooth Fairy drip. And you have to microwave this for about 15-30 seconds. I always find doing it 30 seconds is great. Just wanna make sure that you do take off any of the sealing. If it's the aluminum sealing, sometimes it's hard to come off, so you have to use like a knife or something to scrape it off because you don't wanna put that in the microwave. So now that this is done, I'll just microwave this for 30 seconds, but I'll do that after the parchment, after the cake comes out and the parchment is on. And then the last step is to add our buttercream to the top of the cake. And for that, I'm using this tip, which is number 8. It's number 8B. If you switch cameras, you can make sure that you see this, which one it is. So yeah, this is tip number 8B for this. It's basically an open star tip. And then you can put anything else onto the cake. And you can switch back over now. And to finish topping the cake off, you can put anything else. I'm going to use this tip as well as just some chocolate cookies, but you can put anything on the top of the cake. So I'm just going to use chocolate cookies for it. Is there any other questions? I'm just waiting for that to come out.
Yeah, someone wants to know what's in the white bottle on the screen in front of you.
Yeah, so this is cake drip. This is a green cake drip. This is the Sweet Tooth Fairy brand. You can find it in Michael's. And I'm just using green for this for the whole pumpkin theme. And it's just, you can make cake drip like ganache, but they also make this type of cake drip that's just sold in stores. And it's really easy to use because you just put it in the microwave for a few seconds and then you can drip it down the cake. Is there any other tips, questions? Just waiting for that cake to come out.
People say they love your setup. That's first.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It changes depending on the season. So you see a lot of Halloween things behind me.
How can you tell if the drip is thin enough?
So you want to do a test drip first. If you can always tell if the drip isn't thin enough. Once you milk this and you squeeze it and it's barely coming out, you can also see a texture and it looks like it's a very thick texture. That's how you know, but you can always do a test drip. So you can take this cup here and I flip this cup over. Once I melt it, you can even do a drip down the side of the cake. And you can see how far it runs down. If it goes down way too fast, you need to chill this, put it in the fridge for just a few seconds because you got it too hot and it's too thin. If you do it and it barely comes out and moves, you might want to heat it up in the microwave for a few seconds. So always testing on like a glass or a cup is a good idea before you actually do it on the cake.
And then is that drip different from putting buttercream in the microwave for a few seconds?
Yes, totally different. This drip will harden, especially if the cake is chilled. It'll harden. So as it drips down the cake, if the cake is chilled, it'll start to firm up as it drips. A buttercream that you melt in the microwave, it will never be a very clean drip. Just because it's melted butter that then becomes a solid. And then especially if you're melting a color like a orange butter, like a green buttercream on this orange frosting, because it's melted, the colors could separate a little bit and you can start seeing it on the cake as it drips down. So I would always say I wouldn't do a buttercream drip. I would do a ganache, which is a 1-to-1 of chocolate and cream, or you can just use a store-bought cake drip.
Great. And do you have a recipe for cake drip or?
Yes, you can use ganache. It's on my website, a cake drip that you can use. But yeah, 1-to-1, it's step by step on my website, but a 1-to-1, which is chocolate and hot, heavy whipping cream, mix it all together. And same thing applies, put it in the microwave, let it thin out a little bit, and then see how far it drills.
Perfect. I'm gonna put that in the link for everybody in the chat.
I'm gonna check on the cake now.
There's about 8 minutes left, but we could go over a few. Where's the food? Oh my God.
All right, I'm just gonna give that another minute just because I want this transfer to come off as clean as possible. And then if it's not chilled enough, it'll peel right off with the parchment. Are there any other questions?
People are just saying how much they've enjoyed this class and thank you for it. And they've learned so much. But the next question is, how do you take the dowel out of the cake when you want to eat it?
So actually, so you'll take it out the cake after you cut the first tier, because basically the double barrel cake is 2 tiers stacked on top of each other. So you have that board in the middle. So you'll cut the cake and you'll cut all around the dowel. And then once you have that cake completely done, or whenever you can access the dowel, just cut around the dowel. Once you can access it, just pull it out. And then you can keep cutting the cake. Once you have that top tier done, remove the board, and now you can start cutting the bottom tier. So it's pretty easy to do. I know if you've never done it before, you can it's kind of weird to have a dowel in the middle, but it's really easy to pick up.
Perfect. I'm just going to say there is 5 minutes, but we can go over a few.
Okay, so I'm gonna check on it now, and I'm gonna pull it up as cleanly as I can. Okay, so this has had a long time, but because we're first time here, we're gonna hope that this peels off as best as it can right now. But the longer you allow it to chill, the easier it just peels right off. It's not too bad, but the nose. I'm gonna slowly do this. I'm having some bad luck with my nose, so I'm gonna have to just pipe that back on. Okay, there you go. If it was chilled a little longer, it would have been a lot easier, but there's some patches, so I still have the black buttercream, so I'm just gonna patch that in. But if you allow it to chill completely and take it off, it'll be just fine. So Okay, so I just filled that in, and the same thing as before, just allow it to sit for a couple of seconds, and then you can just take your finger and then pat it flat. That way you have the face even. So now that our face is on there, now I'm going to use the drip. So I'm just going to microwave this for 30 seconds and then drip it down the cake. Make sure that you take the top off and then microwave for 30 seconds. Okay, so this is microwave for 30 seconds. I'm just going to put the top back on and shake it. And if it's still too thick, that's going to be the perfect time to just put it right back in the microwave for a couple seconds. I'm just going to shake it to make sure that I get it all even. And just going to do a test like I said in the cup. Oh, I think there's something. I forgot to remove something. Okay. I'm gonna test it. I can already tell that this is pretty thick. So if you can see how it's dripping down, if this is how you want it to drip, that's fine, but I think it's just a little too thick for me, so I'm just gonna microwave this for like just a couple more seconds. Okay, so this is microwave longer. Let's hope it's not overdone. I'm just gonna test this. And that's a nice better flow than the first time. It's dripping a lot better. So I'm just going to do that around the cake. The more pressure you put, the more you let out, the longer the drip will be. So if you just let a little run down, have a very, very short drip. And because the back is pretty empty, I'm just going to do longer drips so that it can go very far down. And once I get to the face, I'm just going to do very short drips. So that it doesn't touch the eyes that I did. So now you see this drip. And then while it's still wet, because right here, I would like these to be a little longer. While it's wet, you can always just extend it just a little. But once this starts to harden, it'll be too late. Okay, so now that that's done, I'm just going to fill in the top. And this is why adding the buttercream on the very top wasn't extremely necessary, because we're adding this drip. So I'm filling that out on the top, and then just going to take a spatula and then smooth it out. Okay, so that drip's all covered on the top. So now the very last thing to do is just add these cookies. So I'm just gonna add 8 to the very top. While this is still wet, this would be the perfect time to make sure they don't fall. So just gonna start from there. Just going to do it evenly around the cake. Pushing down to make sure they don't fall over. Okay, so just going to pipe the buttercream. So again, with this cup that I have to drip on, I'm going to take another piping bag and I'm going to add the tip that I mentioned earlier, the tip number 8B. So I'm just going to drop that in the bag and see exactly where it is I need to cut it. And I'm just going to drop that in. And then now I'm just going to add white buttercream, so more white buttercream. You can put any type of buttercream. If you want to put more orange, you can, but I'm just going to add white just to have a color difference. So I'm going to grab that white buttercream.
I don't know what that person is.
All right, white buttercream here.
Do you like, oh, sorry, Robert. Do you like reusable piping bags?
Yeah, I mean, any piping bag works. Yeah, these are just plastic piping bags. You can get these from Michaels. They make reusable piping bags, but so if you want to be conservative and not like use the plastic, you can always just use the reusable piping bags. But because I have to use so many different colors, it's a lot easier for me. But any piping bag typically works. And if you don't have a piping bag, a plastic storage bag like a Ziploc bag works too. Sometimes you have to be creative. So now that this is in, I'm just going to push it down. I'm going to do a quick test. Make sure there wasn't an air bubble. And now I'm just going to pipe in between each of the cookies. And I'm just going to pull up. And the trick is to not actually touch the tip to the bottom of the cake. To actually touch the cake, you actually want to leave it elevated and then allow the frosting to touch the cake and then pull up. That way you can have a really nice dowel.
Would you be able to show us the top of the cake with your other camera?
Yeah, I can do that. And that's typically it. So now what I'm going to do is, because I have these sprinkles, I'm just going to add just a little bit more right in the center. Just for some color. Then I'll move the cake over and show you the top. Okay, you can switch if you like. And that's top of the cake. And I just used the cookies to help me make it even. And then yeah.
Would you be able with that framing to do a demo of how you do like the dollop on the top?
Yeah, I can just do it on the top of the lid or something and move this over. So, going to take the pumpkin parchment that I use and fold it over, and I'll do it on top of that. So I have it here, and I'm just not going to actually, so you don't want to actually touch the actual bottom of you want to leave it elevated and then allow it to fall out. That way you can have a nice dollop and it moves, sorry. So let it fall, you have a nice dollop and pull up, and then you can see you have a dollop. If I let it touch and then did it, you can kind of see that it doesn't have that same effect. So you don't want to allow it to touch the cake. You just want to leave it elevated. That way you can have a really nice rounded edge on the dollop. And I'll move it back to the center in case you want to see it that way again.
Yeah, of course. Let's do really quickly, see if anybody has any last minute questions.
Yeah.
Because we did go over a few minutes. But the cake looks great, Robert.
That's a 360.
Everybody loves.
Yeah, this is I did it pretty quick, but yeah, it still came out really well. Again, like if you're going to do a buttercream transfer, I don't think it's just you definitely want to allow it to set and chill very firmly before removing it, and then you can also take your time with whatever image it is that you want to transfer. You can do anything elaborate, as long as you have the buttercream and a nice image or whatever it is you like to do. This works for anything.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Robert, and everybody else for joining tonight.
Thank you all. And I hope that you all, send me pictures of the cakes that you all make. I'd love to see them.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night, you all.